Most players think playing like the pros just means hitting the ball like the pros, but that's so not true. If you really want to take your game to the next level and start playing like the pros, there has to be something that's much deeper, which is what are they doing other than hitting the ball? We get so caught up in hitting the ball that we forget to look at where are they moving, how are they reacting? And in this video, I'm going to show you 4 tips of what the pros do so you can start playing like them the next time you're on the court. Tip number 1, you have to start recovering. Whenever you watch a pro match, what you're going to really notice if you're paying attention is they move to specific locations on the court based on where they hit the ball. And this happens all the time. And this is one of the biggest differences between professionals and recreational players. When I watch recreational players hit and they watch their ball and they'll wait to see what happens and they wonder why they're out of position for the very next shot. When you watch professional players, they hit and they recover. And all recovery means is you're moving in between your opponent's 2 best shots. And that's so important. And this is so key to becoming a better player. And the biggest mistake that I see a lot of players making is this assumption that no matter what ball I hit, I need to move back to the center of the court. Well, the problem is the center of the court isn't always the center. And what this means is based on where your shot is, your opponent's gonna have more court to work with. And if you're not in the middle of it, guess what? You're giving your opponent an advantage. There's 3 main locations on the court based on the 3 main shots that you can hit in tennis, meaning that you can hit the ball up the middle, cross court, or down the line. So let's start with up the middle first. If you hit the ball up the middle, which is probably what most players are thinking, where's the place you want to be after you hit it? The place you want to be is back in the middle of the court because you've given your opponent equal distance on both sides to hit the next shot into. Where it starts to change is if you hit the ball cross court. So if I hit the ball cross court with my forehand and my opponent decides to go down the line, where's the farthest they're going to have to run? Well, it's the single sideline. They can't hit a ball that's gonna kind of skid in the single sideline and skid way off the court. It's just not gonna happen. But if they go cross court back to my forehand with enough topspin or an angle, where am I gonna have to run? It's gonna be far past the single sideline, meaning that that side of the court is gonna be much larger for me to cover. Therefore, I don't wanna move back to the center of the court per se, meaning the hash mark. I wanna move back to the new center, which is slightly off to the right side on my forehand to make sure I can cover most of the court. Now, the final one is if you go down the line, and this is very tricky. If you go down the line and you're behind the court, what's happening? Well, let's think about it. If your opponent takes your down the line, back down the line, where's the farthest you have to run? Not that far. But if they take it cross court, wow. Look at all the court you're gonna have to cover. And this is why the pros cover the court so efficiently, is because they're always moving back into the center of their opponent's best shot, unless they have a really good reason for that. So this is the thing I want you to think about. Always try to hit the ball so you're in the middle of your opponent's 2 best shots. It's so important. Now, let's go do a drill to help you focus on how you can train this so it can become a new habit. So the drill we're gonna focus on to make sure you're recovering in the right spot is really simple. I have 3 different cones set up on this side. You can see the green, the blue, and then you see the yellow. On the other side of the court, I have the associated cone, meaning the green, the blue, and the yellow. So the key is we're hitting to a zone, and then we move back to the correct recovery position based on where we hit the ball. And what this does is it puts us in the middle of our opponent's best 2 shots. So let's get started. And it's really simple. I have a couple balls in my pocket. I'm gonna first hit the blue cone on the other side of the court. So if I hit the blue cone, it's really easy, boom. I'm already in the right position. So there's not a lot of movement if you hit the ball at the middle. The difference now is if I hit the ball to the green, which is on the other side. If I hit over here, I'm already in position. Now, most players hit the ball cross court and move back to the middle, leaving too much court for them to cover on this side. Because again, remember, if my opponent takes their forehand back cross court and creates an angle, they can run me off the court. And this is why this is now the new middle of the court, because there's not as much room to run on that side, but there's more room to run on this side. And this is the exact same thing on the backhand side. If I'd run over and hit a backhand cross court, then I'm already in position here and I wouldn't run back to the center of the court. Now, the last big movement you might have to do is, what if you hit the ball down the line? Now, there's 2 things I want you to think about when you're hitting the ball down the line. If I go down the line, 1, I have to make sure, ooh, got a cone. If I go down the line 1, I have to make sure I run all the way back over here by the time my opponent makes contact with the ball. And that's difficult. You have more room to cover, especially if you go down the line and you're further out wide. The key is understanding this, but by understanding this, realize you want more time. So if I go down a line, I'm gonna buy myself more time by hitting the ball higher, which gives me more time to recover. And this brings up a really, really important concept, which is hitting yourself in and out of position. If I'm running over to hit a cross court, after the cross court, I've hit myself in position. I don't have to move that far, even if I do hit it a little bit from a wider position. But if I hit myself down the line and don't have a good reason for it, I've hit myself out of position now, and I have to run all the way over here. This is why this is so important. Try to focus on hitting yourself in position unless you have a really good reason to hit yourself out of position. Tip number 2 is learning how to play offense and defense. This is so important because when you watch the pros and they hurt their opponent or they're being forced, they have a different reaction. Most recreational players play most of the point from the baseline, and I'm not playing around, from the baseline, 2 or 3 feet outside the baseline, or if not on the baseline, the entire point. This is a problem. They're not adjusting, meaning that if your opponent hits you a high ball that puts you on defense, what do you need to do? Not play it from the baseline. You need to scoot back and then hit a defensive shot back because you're in a defensive position. Now, equally, if your opponent hits a short shot, maybe because you've hit a great shot, or maybe they just made a mistake and hit a short shot, you need to go on offense. So there's always this shifting of gears of going on offense and defense. Next time you watch the pros, watch how they respond to when their opponent puts them on defense, meaning that they're moving them off the court. They're gonna respond with the ball that's either safer, higher, something that buys them time to get themselves back in the court, because time is so important in tennis. Also, watch when they get a short ball, how they move up and they keep the pressure on by attacking. They're gonna force their opponent to make sure their opponent doesn't have a chance to get back in the point. Now, this can be done just the same if you're not a professional player. The key is noticing what type of ball you're receiving and responding with the correct ball on top of that, meaning that players receive a difficult ball and they wanna hit it even harder or better ball back. That's not the answer. You're butting heads. What you want to do is receive a difficult ball and absorb it by hitting a safer ball back. Because the number one thing in tennis is this: most of the tennis points are won because players make a mistake. This is a huge recipe for making mistakes when someone hits a very difficult ball to you and you try to trump them by hitting a better ball back. So what you want to do, instead of when you feel pressure, try to put pressure back, is when you feel pressure, try to take the pressure off of you. Okay, so this is really important. But equally, when your opponent feels pressure, keep the pressure on them. I see so many recreational players that when they hit a great shot, they're still on the baseline, their opponent barely gets the ball back, and they're running up and they're scrambling and they can't get to it. And guess what they say? Great shot. It's not a great shot. You just didn't recognize that they were in trouble. So now let's go do an exercise so you can start practicing when you receive either an offensive or defensive ball, what you need to do, and it becomes a new habit. The next skill we're going to talk about is responding in an offensive and defensive situation. Now, it's great if you had a partner or a ball machine. You could use the partner or ball machine to feed you balls where you have to move away from the court, but you can still do it by yourself. The whole idea of having a partner or a ball machine, preferably a partner, is so you could call the ball and you see it coming and you say defense, meaning that you have to move back and play a defensive shot. This drill is going to focus on the response of whatever that shot might be, the response you're going to do, because so many players will move back because they have to, but they'll hit the wrong response that goes with that shot, meaning that if I'm moving away from the court, I need to hit a defensive shot. If I'm in a defensive position, I shouldn't be going for an offensive shot. And this is something so important to realize. So what this means is you can take a ball and all I want you to do is toss it behind you and move back. So you're tossing behind you and moving back, making sure that you're hitting the ball higher above the net. This is to give you more time. So the further you toss the ball back, the higher you want to hit the ball to buy yourself more time. And this is the drill. Take 5, 6, 7, 8 balls and toss it back and just get used to the idea of moving away from the court, hitting the ball higher and hitting the ball higher, because the more this becomes a habit, it'll become second nature. Not only if you're just moving back from the middle of the court, if you're moving away from the court, running to a cross court, you should hit the ball higher and more than likely aim at least cross court, but if you're in a lot of trouble, aim for the center of the court. The next idea is when you're on offense, meaning you're tossing the ball in front of you. When you toss the ball in front of you, it means you're moving inside the court. Hence, you don't need to hit the ball as high. You actually want to think about, how can I maybe take some time away from my opponent? Now, here's the one caveat when you're thinking about offense. Are you balanced and can you rotate? Meaning there's sometimes where the ball might be short and you're moving forward, but you're not in control of that point. You are not balanced and there's no way you can rotate because you're scrambling at the ball. This is not the ball we want to actually play offense. We want to focus on knowing the right moments to play offense because we can get up to the ball and we're balanced and we can rotate. So what this means is as I toss it in front, I'm balanced and I can rotate, and that means I can be offensive. And you want to make sure you're bouncing back and forth between playing offense and defense. And obviously if it's in the middle of court, you don't have to move back or you can't move forward. It's a neutral ball. You send back a rally shot. But this trains you to not get stuck in one spot and not to hit the same shot back. Meaning I'm moving back, playing defense, recovering, boom, moving up and playing offense. And the more you can start playing defense and offense, or offense and then defense, the more dynamic of a player you become because you can adapt to different situations. Tip number 3, which is your split step. And you probably think split step, that's easy, that's the beginner stuff. Well, the beginning stuff sets you up for the advanced stuff. And this is the key with the split step. The reason why the split step is so important is because it allows you to take the energy from landing and moving in a new direction. By split stepping, it pre-starts you in motion. It gets you in motion so when you land, you can use that energy to move in a direction. If you're not split stepping, then you're always gonna be a little bit slower. I've noticed this so much working with so many players, and I'm wondering, why didn't they get to that ball? Why didn't they react to this? It's because a lot of times they're not split stepping. And it's not just split stepping, because here's the other thing. I see some players that are out there constantly split stepping. They're over split stepping. It's about the timing of the split step. And have the correct timing, you have to watch your opponent hit the ball. And this is an aha moment, because better players, advanced players, pro players can play at that level because they're watching their opponent hit the ball, which gives them clues to what they might be receiving through the racket face. And if you're not watching your opponent hit the ball, you don't have those clues, you don't know when to split step, and you're gonna be a little bit slower. And this is why the split step is so important. And now, as you're landing, you can start going in the next direction that you need to. Not only this, in the beginning, you might just land with both of your toes forward. After a while, by noticing what the racket face is doing and different angles and positions your opponent's in, you'll start noticing that when the pros are in the air, they start landing going in the direction because they're picking up on clues. And this makes them anticipate and be faster. And that's the difference between pros and amateurs. Pros are split stepping, but they're split stepping not just to move their feet, they're split stepping because they're watching their opponent make contact with the ball. They're picking up on clues to now land and go in a direction, which makes them so much quicker and they get to so many more balls. So let's go do a drill so you can start developing this new habit of split stepping and the right timing to make sure that you can start landing and you're watching your opponent and you can start picking up on those clues so you can get to more balls. Okay, now we're gonna do a quick drill to help you with your split step, and I'm gonna need your participation. So if you're sitting down or if you have some space, go ahead and get up and make sure you have a tennis ball. So I'll give you a quick second to go get that, or you can pause the video. Now, the way we wanna time the split step is when your opponent's making contact that we're landing. I think there's a confusion because a lot of times we think when they're making contact, we should be lifting. The whole idea of landing when they're making contact is as they hit and we start landing, we can get clues that we can now use to go in a direction. Versus if they hit and we lift, now the ball's coming back to our side and we're in the air. So you can see how this timing can be really bad if you don't have the correct timing. So the idea here is this. What I'm gonna do is toss the ball in the air and catch it. This catching represents your opponent hitting. So what really needs to happen, I'll do it with you in a second, is that you're gonna lift and land when I catch. So lift and land when I catch, which really would be lift and land. So you have to be watching your opponent as they're getting ready to hit, and as they start their swing, you're gonna start lifting and then land when they make contact. So what I want you to do in a second, I'm going to toss the ball a couple times like this, and when I catch it, you should be landing. So it'll look like this, lift and land. And so to make this a little bit more appealing so you can see what should happen, I'm gonna use my hand as a racket. So it should be lift and land, okay? So you see your opponent go lift and land. Again, lift and land. I'll do it 2 more times. Lift and land. So make sure you're practicing this a lot because it's one of the most essential things to becoming a better player on the court and playing like the pros, because they're using information not only just by watching their opponent to go in different directions, but they're ready to move. And if you're not doing this, there's no way you can start playing like the pros. And the last tip I have for you is to kick them while they're down. I know this sounds bad. but it's really important. And when we watch the pros, they keep kicking when they have their opponent down. And what this means is, basically, when your opponent's in trouble, continue to put the pressure on. This ties into the offensive portion of offense-defense, meaning that when you have this opportunity, so many players, even in doubles or singles, they see their opponent in trouble, they hit their shot they think they're supposed to hit, and then they back off. They don't keep and continue to put that pressure on, which means they don't feel that same amount of pressure. And so this is the key. When you start noticing that your opponent is in trouble, you want to keep taking time away. This is why Andre Agassi was so successful. He noticed when his opponent was in trouble and continued to put pressure on by moving forward and taking time away from his opponent. So every shot they hit seemed like it was getting harder and harder and harder for them to hit, because it became more difficult and more difficult and more difficult because they have less and less time. And so this is the key for you to understand to become a player that plays more like the pros. So playing like the pros isn't just about having the pretty looking strokes. If you have the pretty looking pro looking strokes, but you don't have these qualities with it, that means you're missing out on a huge opportunity. So many players that don't play or look like the pros, but they understand these concepts and play like the pros, have way better results, because it's not how your stroke looks, it's what you can do with the ball, what you can do to your opponent. And if you want to know more about how to play like the pros, make sure you check out this video, because it's going to go into more depth about playing offense and defense and taking time away, which is one of these key things that if you want to be more successful on the tennis court, you have to know how to make your opponent feel pressure by taking time away.